Well, that's a hard act to follow, but on behalf of the GFCC, I want to thank Jim Clifton and Chad Holliday, our chairman, for that incredible discussion. And really, everybody needs to go and follow up on this data about employee engagement and looking at strengths versus weaknesses. It's very transformational. So Jim, thank you for coming to Athens to Greece. And I know there's a great interview you did that's in the papers here. So, and I do have to put in a plug for our wonderful partners, colleagues here, Simeon Simokos from Delphi Economic Forum and Simos Anastasopoulos of Compete Greece, because Simeon, wouldn't it be fantastic to have Jim at Delphi Economic Forum with people from all over Europe? Thank you. So we're going to jump in to the questions and opportunities around this shifting global competitiveness landscape, how it impacts our respective nations in developing really sustainable and resilient innovation strategy, competitive strategy. And we've just heard in the previous discussion, you know, the classical measures of outcomes. What is competitiveness? Well, traditionally, certainly from the US perspective, it's increases in productivity coupled to an ever-rising standard of living for all citizens and competing globally. And we know now, you know, over certainly the last 35 years of when the competitiveness movement started, that there's now different issues that have come into that equation. And we heard some of them just in the previous discussion, that, you know, you can have the great policies, optimal policies around tax policy, regulation, building the infrastructure, investing in research and development, et cetera. But if you don't have talented, skilled people that are at the heart of building the future, many of those other things will never come to fruition. So we have a great panel here of leaders. They're all leaders from their countries. They're all engaged in shaping the economic future, but also leading their respective businesses, universities, et cetera. And so I'm going to and they're board members of the GFCC, and I will introduce everyone, but I first want to thank Ray Johnson for being our latest board member of the GFCC. And so you're all going to give a leadership perspective, and I'll introduce you. But then I want to ask everybody kind of the same overarching question, and then we'll get a little bit more specific. So of course, where's Chad? There's Chad. I think you all know Chad Holliday, our chairman, and his incredible background, leadership accomplishment as a great CEO, global chairman and things, but he's also someone who's given so much of his time and effort to nonprofit organizations such as the U.S. Council and many, many others. He was the founder of the World Business Council for Sustainability when the word wasn't even used. So Chad, thank you for your continued leadership and vision. You also, with Khandi Yamkela, created with the UN Energy Access for All, which again continues to have impacts around the world. Isabel Gill, we heard Isabel this morning in the wonderful session that Khandi Yamkela narrated, and Isabel's the president of Catholica University. Again, she's one of the university leaders in the world that is, yes, continuing some of the traditional things that universities do, but your partnerships that you've built are amazing. And I just have to tell one story about you. Isabel has one of the most strategic academic industry partnerships with an American company called Amgen, creating the blue economy. And I think, you know, the power of your strengths, here's a strength, in being able to articulate and convey in a very short time that the CEO of Amgen led to him almost on the spot, giving you a $50 million partnership. That's a strength, Isabel, that we all want to emulate. George Hadji Nicolaou is a dear friend, colleague. He's the chairman of Piraeus Bank. He has an incredible background in global banking from New York to London. You're also on the board of the Athex Group, and you had an interesting trajectory of life too, starting in Greece and sort of the more northern part of Greece, coming to the United States and building this incredible career. And I know you've played a role in what we heard from the Minister of Finance today and last night as well, about the transformation of the financial sector and banking to get Greece on this road for growth and prosperity. Ray Johnson, well, it's hard to introduce Ray because, again, friend and colleague, but Ray is one of our technology leaders in the United States. He started his career in the Air Force as an officer. And Ray, you always say that you speak fluent Korean, and unfortunately, I can't ask you a question in Korean to know if that's true or not. But it's one of your many strengths and talents. But Ray went on, you know, to build a career. He's a PhD in engineering and things in Lockheed Martin. Well, other defense companies first, but Lockheed Martin, he was the senior vice president, the chief technology officer, in charge of really all the technology and engineering underpinning the tremendous technological prowess and delivery of missions of Lockheed Martin for security. And I know Lockheed Martin's very big and important in the Greek market here as well for their defense. But then you went into the venture capital world as senior partner at Bessemer, and I know you were one of the first investors in a very important quantum computing company as well, but you've just been lured away from the United States to be the founding CEO of the new Technology Institute in Abu Dhabi that we're going to hear about. But you're a builder and a change agent, so thank you for being with us and for being on the board of GSCC.
Thank you.
And then Gianna Silva, Gianna also is a leader and a change agent. She's had a fabulous career, starting at the United Nations. You did a lot of work with the United Nations in northern Brazil, but around the world, and then was the top advisor to the CEO and chairman of the Brazilian National Development Bank, BNDES, which is, you know, a bank of development on a bigger scale than the Hellenic National Development Bank and Athena Petra that we heard from last night. But we always say in the United States, gee, we wish we had BNDES. But from there, Gianna was recruited away to go to the Confederation of Industry in Brazil. And it's an interesting model. Every business in Brazil, large scale and smaller enterprise, they have to be a member of the Confederation of Industry, and they have chapters all over the country. So this is a powerhouse of industrial leadership. And Gianna now is the head of all innovation strategy, and she's put together an initiative called MAY, Mobilizing Enterprises for Innovation. And she is really changing not just the thinking in Brazil, but the partnerships that are now being forged in Brazil and around the world. So thank you all. Well, let me start with you, George. I'll start with you really about, from your perspective and what we've heard this morning and today and continue, what do you think really are the big global challenges in competitiveness, linking back to our principles, to really jumpstart this next wave of productivity and job creation to take us on this path of sustainable prosperity for our citizens? And of course, what's the role of the financial sector in all of that?
Thank you, Deborah. And before I start my observations, I'd like to really pick up a little bit on your very kind introduction and say, to a very large extent, I have benefited from what Mr. Clifton mentioned before. I basically grew up professionally in the US, which gave me the opportunity to focus on the positives and not on the negatives. It gave me the opportunity to grow professionally by emphasizing the strengths, to really use this terminology. And I am very thankful for that. So turning now to the question you put to me, I would say that looking ahead at how we can promote and frame competitiveness, the environment in which we currently trying to undertake this effort is most probably one of the most challenging we have seen for perhaps in our life. We basically still are working out the aftermath of the COVID epidemic in terms of restoring the supply chains, in terms of trying to come to restore some balance in the economy, the fiscal economy, because monetary authorities pumped a lot of liquidity into the markets in order to stabilize the economies. And that has had some undesirable effects in terms of creating some inflation. And if that was not enough, then we had the Ukraine developments, which put more fuel to the fire in terms of inflation because they have led to increases across the board in various commodity prices with energy number one, but not only in wheat and in fertilizers and many others. And more broadly, has really led into higher inflation, which is coming in a very unfortunate time when the economy is trying to recover from COVID. So all these things are putting rather severe challenges because they're affecting directly our initiatives and our thoughts of how to promote competitiveness. Just to basically throw an example, inflation, as we know, affects the strata of the society unevenly, most probably punishing the weaker more than the stronger, who have more ability to shift the price increases. And that undermines the social trust, which is a fundamental precondition in order to really lay out either innovation, inclusiveness, and other things. So I would suggest that as we look forward, we need to address the root causes of these developments in order to create the bedrock on which we can build upon other initiatives. The banking and more generally the financial sector can play a significant role here. And I will cite as an example the kind of stuff we do at Piraeus Bank as part of our social responsibility, corporate responsibility. We have a rather engaging activity in the form of Project Future, for example, where we assist young people to enhance their skills, which are required in the modern economy, and they are not fully addressed by the public education, providing them the opportunity to secure better jobs. Also, we have initiated another program called Equal, which is another effort on our part to improve inclusiveness in the society by highlighting the importance of providing equal opportunity along the gender dimension, but not only. So these are a couple of things, and I'm sure others at other financial institutions and other corporations, not only from finance, should be, and they are doing initiatives like this. I'll stop here and we'll engage more.
Thank you. And, you know, we're kind of looking at where we are right now in the presence, a little bit ahead, but then kind of in our next round, I want us to think, you know, longer term, if we can, sort of on the edge of the future. But Isabel, let me turn to you. You, of course, are president of a preeminent leading university in Portugal, Catholic University, but you also have been the chair of the Association of Catholic Universities around the world. You have operations in Macau and really have been a leader, yes, in these public-private partnerships, the industrial collaboration. But I want to ask you this question as the president of a university. We have many university president leaders in the GFCC. What do you see as these global challenges that are of great impact on the university? I mean, the university today and in transition, and you mentioned a few yesterday in our annual meeting.
Thank you, Deborah. I want to start perhaps by saying that the university does not exist. That universities are different as they operate in different conditions throughout the globe. So many of the things that we're talking about here, we speak about competitiveness, about adapting our talent, our infrastructure, our strategy, our mission to the needs of industry. We need to understand that in other areas of the globe, our fellow presidents are fighting for their students to survive, to come to class the next day. And this is a conversation I had with a rector from Congo, a president of a university in Erbil, who's also part of the association. And so we understand that we live in an uneven world and that universities operate in uneven conditions. But having said that, I think it is our task and our mission to cooperate and collaborate with those who are working in those difficult circumstances. If we ourselves, and it is also for our self-interest, if we are to grow and thrive. We are deeply interconnected. I think one of the challenges that we face is we need to step away from the globalization utopia, to think that it is easy. We cooperate globally, but we cannot do away with the national needs. And we were talking earlier about place-based innovation. In Europe, we talk about cohesion. And so it is important to consider those measures, the cohesion of the territory, of your national environment. You can only collaborate globally if you take care of, if you understand what are your national strengths, and you build from those strengths to participate in a global conversation amongst equals, right? So I think the national, we need to put that back into the picture. And that is particularly important for universities that operate on these two levels. They are, or we are, levers of security for our countries. There's no national security without strong science. But we also contribute for peace. And I always think about critical and crucial institutions for our development today that were created, were set up during or between the two world wars. For instance, the Max Planck Institute and many others were set up as a way of trying to bridge the difficult political opposition that was going on after the First World War. Of course, they didn't succeed very much in those times, but we have to learn from that experience. I think that it is through science that we can contribute to a better and peaceful future. Just two final things. I was very taken with the data that Jim Clifton presented. One about the rise of hunger data. It's one of the SDGs. We have the means to fight and to eradicate world hunger, but we need leadership for that. And that goes with global collaboration. The second one was anger. It's deeply troubling. We need to look at those root causes. And we face that anger in the youth that we are training every day. So we have to pay attention to that. Yesterday, we heard about the 100,000 Greek graduates that are unemployed. It's a great opportunity, but it's an opportunity that the country needs to take now, immediately. There is no, I would say, no time there. One, because highly skilled graduates are scarce, and other countries are looking for that talent, right? And secondly, as I said yesterday in our meeting, I think the unemployed graduate is probably the most dangerous political actor at the moment. So we need to pay attention and move in that.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to a few very important issues you raised and turn to Ray. But before I do, I want to just come back to you, George. You know, this issue that there are 100,000 highly trained STEM graduates in Greece that are unemployed is really, I think for many of us, was kind of shocking to hear that number given the size of the population. But of course, in the banking, financial sector, I mean, I've seen the trading room and ethics. It's highly, highly technical. It's very advanced. Do you think that the banks writ large, the financial sector of the country, can play a role in helping place these very talented STEM graduates, not in existing enterprises, but also kind of unleash that entrepreneurship that, again, is going to be the creation of the new enterprises and the new jobs to propel the economy forward. You were very visionary with the Roots program, and there are others, but...
We are touching on a subject where clearly has attracted the attention of the policymakers, but that unfortunately it has a long history and it's not as simple as it sounds. If you basically ask the question, I have 100,000 people potentially that could be deployed to grow the economy, it's almost like it doesn't make sense, right? But you have, if you dig a little bit further down, you will see that perhaps these 100,000 people, many of them may not have the skills that the modern economy requires. And that's why, I mentioned before, for example, Project Future, which is an initiative that is driven by Parias Bank. Why? Because it takes a small portion of that pool and tries to retrain it in order to meet the needs of the Greek economy. We have here the oxymoron where we have these 100,000 people looking for a job, and yet the industry has shortages in a series of skill sets. So it seems to be a broader issue, which is most probably, perhaps uniquely Greek, where the supply does not necessarily meet the demands of the modern economy, which requires a broader discussion and a broader effort how you reskill and how you reorganize, if you want, the orientation of the Greek educational system, particularly the higher end, the university level, in order to respond to the needs of a modern economy. So what I'm saying is there is a story a little bit behind the headline here of 100,000 available people. Maybe they're not the right skill, or not maybe, they don't have the right skill set. But also it's a question of demand, which is really being addressed, as we heard from Mr. Patelis yesterday, by a series of initiatives that the country is undertaking in terms of unblocking the economy, creating the incentives for new capital to come in, which is creating jobs. But the system has to respond by providing the skill set that is required as well.
Thank you. And we heard last night from the Chief Investment Officer of the Lambda Development about what they're doing that is obviously going to require a very diverse and very high-level skill set to accomplish that. Let me turn to you, Ray, and talk a little bit about you're the first CEO, in a way the founder, under the auspices of the government of Abu Dhabi, of this very innovative new model for technological development, commercialization, working in the most disruptive areas of technology. And you've put together this group with talent drawn from all over the world. How are you aligning your vision and that of Abu Dhabi with these global challenges? And what priorities are you setting as you launch this institute? And we all look forward to coming and visiting you under the GFCC.
I look forward to that as well. First of all, thank you for the introduction. And as this is my first panel, I want to thank all of the gracious hosts who hosted us here. It's been wonderful, and it's a great city, so thank you. As you said, Deborah, what I'll do is I'll make some comments about the position and the role, and then I'll translate that into what I think it implies. So the leadership in Abu Dhabi, and more broadly the UAE, recognizes, among other things, that the commodities-based petroleum economy is not going to last forever. And so they're very interested in transforming the economy of the UAE from a commodities-based to a knowledge-based economy. People recognize that innovation plays an important role there. They also recognize that there are an increasing number of global challenges that we face. And so the 640 people from 63 nationalities in 10 centers are in fact aligned well with the SDGs. And so I think that's a recognition. In fact, 3 new centers, Biotechnology Center, which is, of course focuses on health, Propulsion and Space Center, the UAE is a spacefaring nation, and then renewable energy sustainability, of course, points to one of the critical challenges that we face today in sustainability. So I think we've shown adaptiveness, if you will. What kind of institute is this? This is an applied research organization. Literally no research is performed that doesn't either contribute to the foundation of applied research or applied research, or is applied research itself. And I think this speaks to the issue that I think we face as a world and as nations, and that is that, first of all, I'm going to separate invention versus innovation. We talked about this a little bit yesterday. I'll give you my definition. Invention is the creation of the idea, and innovation is the application of the idea to products and services. And we also heard yesterday that there are maybe R&D or innovation, excuse me, kind of three types. I'm going to use words that weren't exactly what I heard, but they're curiosity-based innovation and applied innovation, and then crisis innovation. And then we also recognize that the role of government, industry, and academia all play important roles in this application of R&D to get to outcomes. And so I like to think of this as kind of like we do, a TRL-based scale, technology readiness level. And if I try to put the expertise of the various entities into this TRL level, and then also consider the three types of R&D or three types of innovation, I recognize that in the early stage, academia plays an important role. And they play an important near-term and far-term role. There's an applied component of academic research, and there's a curiosity base that can lead to great breakthroughs going forward. And then there's an industry role, and there's a government role. And the role of the government, I think, is to take on high-risk, high-payoff activities. And so if you put these all together and think of this as a TRL scale, it also speaks to the last things that we heard about the world that's becoming more disengaged. People want to make a difference. And I think as we focus, as we recognize that we have a world of problems in the SDGs and in all the things that we face, and we recognize that we have a more or less disengaged working population, people want to make a difference. And so I think by focusing on outcomes that matter and engaging people in these outcomes, they will feel better about making a difference. I remember hearing a lot of people who are senior leaders and executives, and they love woodworking. Why do they love woodworking? Because it's something they can get their hands on and really do. And so I think making a difference through this process of engaging the three entities, thinking about the TRL scale where they can fit, working on problems that matter, and getting full engagement is the approach that we're taking, and I think it has more broad application.
Thank you, and we'll come back and talk a little bit about some of the specific initiatives you're working on that really are aligned with some of these global big challenges in addition to what's going on in the Emirates and the broader region. Gianna, let me turn to you, and you really have been a force of nature in the Confederation of Industry because, yes, it's a big, powerful, long-standing entity in Brazil, but it has a little bit of conservatism, and you were the one who came in and somehow, through your knowledge, personality, and drive, really got the mobilization of enterprise for innovation going. How does that drive link to these new global challenges now that we're facing, and we kind of own from energy security and food, et cetera, and how do you get these CEOs to spend the time and effort to work to create this future in Brazil?
Yes. Thank you, Deborah. Hi, everyone. I will just explain a bit about MEI, because MEI, CNI is the Brazilian Confederation of Industry, so we have 27 federations of industries, one in each state of Brazil. And the industrial system, we have many institutions like CNI that is responsible for developing R&D and innovation and also vocational training. For example, we have 62 institutes of technology and 26 institutes of innovation distributed all over Brazil. And then we have SESI that is responsible for education at all levels, and health and safe, and a business school for the whole system. So we represent more than 1 million industries in Brazil, all sectors and all sizes. But my role is, as Director of Innovation, is to coordinate an entrepreneurial mobilization for innovation that I would say that is the main space of dialogue in Brazil between the entrepreneurial sector, the academia, and the Brazilian government, including executive and legislative. We will complete 15 years next year. So, and it's a movement, it's not institutional. So we have now around 500 of the main Brazilian entrepreneurial leaders, talking to ministers, presidents, and senators, legislators. And what we are doing is to work with a long-term vision and focusing on what we, from the industrial perspective, what we believe that is the future strategy for Brazil. I would say that innovation is like a nickname to talk about education, high quality of education at all levels, STEAM, and we, for example, proposed the new guidelines for engineering in Brazil. This is an outcome of May. We proposed the new law of science, technology, and innovation, the legal framework. Now, 2 years ago, we proposed the new law for the National Fund for Science, Technology, and Innovation. And we liberated billions of reais to be invested in science, technology, and innovation. So it's a movement. We are talking about collaboration, to be very open to different perspectives, but working together to have outcomes for the country. But I believe that this is not different for other countries. Now we are stressing the importance of having industrial policy linked with the science, technology, and innovation policy, perhaps with mission-oriented programs that could answer many challenges of Brazil as sustainability, social inclusion, and many others. So it's a good experience, but we have now mailing with the new government elected. We will have so much work to do with them, but we are always very open to work together, to give proposals, our perspectives. And I believe that innovation and competitiveness is being a priority now in Brazil.
Thank you. And we're going to come back and talk a little bit more about, how Brazil created some of the most competitive enterprises in the world, such as Embraer and the agricultural sector and Natura, and what are some of the challenges of that not expanding more broadly? So Chad, I purposely saved you for last because when I look at your career, and we heard this morning, the imagination and creativity of how you presented the Competitiveness Award to Christos Megalou for his leadership in the financial sector. You have always been a leader that's been thinking, yes, dealing with the future, but thinking ahead. And so today we know sustainability and resiliency are at the top of the national, regional, global agendas. How did you, as a leader, really build the consensus to be out in front and take the risk to really focus on those issues, which, again, were not in the mainstream, and they were very, very future-oriented, and yet you moved the whole conversation and the reality forward.
Yeah, Deborah, thanks so much, and thanks for your leadership. What you've created here with CFC and the council is just amazing. I think the best way to answer your question is the three things I've seen that are critical to get people with you in what you're doing along the way. And the first one is people need to be proud of the organization they work for. And a good test of that, I was first becoming chair of Shell. I visited 20-odd countries. And when I would meet with employees, I would say, I'm going to be chair of Shell. What do you want me to do? And the one that moved me the most is an expat in Singapore who said, I want my 13-year-old daughter to go to school and tell them where their dad works, because she's ashamed to say works for Shell, because it's an oil and gas company. It has a bad connotation. So I'm proud of working for Shell. I know what we're doing is good. I know what we're doing for mankind, but my daughter won't say that. So will you change that? And I think that really moved me more than all the comments I got around the world, everywhere else. And so that's one of the things I focused on. And what I found the same phenomena with our very young engineers and scientists and people that had just come with the company that weren't directly out on an oil rig or something. They wouldn't tell their friends they worked for Shell. And they would have colleagues, but they thought they would be looked on negatively because of that. So I think make your organization, no matter what you're doing, deal with that issue. The second is people need to be doing meaningful work themselves. They have to know their job is mission critical, it's really making a difference, and it's appreciated and valued. And my advice to people is if you find yourself in a job that's not that way, change it and make it meaningful. Quit doing the stuff that's not adding value and just do adding value stuff. If you can't change it, quit the job and go somewhere else where you can. But I think it's very important that people have that development, that opportunity. And the last one is we all want to be growing all the time. I don't care what our age is, where we are. We want to learn new skills. We want to do more. And so what I find is if you can offer development, you need to be competitive with your wage. But the key thing is if you're bringing development where you're growing, people won't leave you because they don't want to miss on that development. So those three things are key. So back to your original question, I think when we're focusing on sustainability, it can play into all three of those. But you've got to see how it plays into somebody's personal life, not theoretical. But if it plays into those three, it really works.
And when we undertook together at the U.S. Council, when you were our chairman and CEO and chairman of Shell, the resiliency work, that was very controversial as a competitiveness issue. I remember some of our colleagues said, well, you know, what is this resiliency? Why are you working on that? And yet resiliency, fast forward, is just one of the foundational blocks. So looking back sort of 2005 when we started all that and today, how do you think the global challenges we're facing, energy, food, water, geostrategic, demographics, climate, why is resiliency and this challenge of being resilient out of crisis more important than ever?
So in that work around 2005, we were trying to pinpoint what the next crisis is going to be. And we had these very long lists of crises. And it was so much, you feel, well, how can you deal with all that? And it turned out the next crisis was a financial crisis, and nowhere was that on our list. So what we concluded, you cannot predict the next crisis. You can predict the next hurricane, but the fundamental crisis you can't predict. So it's this resiliency that we came up with was so important. And I say very simply, it's not on knowing what to do, but why am I doing it? Because the what might be different in a crisis. But if I know why, I understand, I've got the skills, I can adapt to do that. I think that's still the case today. I think it's still very difficult to predict the next crisis. I think since 2005, we've proven that over and over again. But if people have strength of capability and skills, then you can apply it if you adjust very quickly.
Thank you. Now, in the time we have left, it seems like the time has gone very, very fast, but I know we're going to have lunch after this, and we're all hungry after a wonderful morning. We've talked about, you know, some of the general part. I do want us to spend the rest of our time on your leadership perspectives on, we're going to have a separate discussion later during the sessions on place-based innovation. But it's more important than ever. We're the Global Federation of Competitiveness Councils, but we all live in our nations, in our regions. And Chad, you remember when the GFCC was first started, we had some members in the United States who said, oh, you're the U.S. Council. Why are you, doing anything globally? And yet, here we are, global, sharing best practices, working partnerships, but we all have a responsibility to the countries and places where we live. And in the United States, this is going to be a major thrust of the U.S. Council, our place-based innovation. We can't just have centers of innovation, the East and West Coast. We have to build this out throughout our nation, and I think it's true in each of the parts of the world that are represented here today. So, Gianna, I'm going to just go to you first and then and come back, but Brazil is a huge, big country, and you have huge disparities
Yes.
the north, the south. I mean, we heard about Porto
Yes.
Alegre. What is CNI doing through your federation to build this capacity across your great nation and draw on your strengths?
Yes, for sure, inequality in Brazil is a big challenge, as sustainability, as energy transition. Well, CNI is working on, I would say, all the fronts to propose public policies for the Brazilian government. What we are doing besides these proposals is to develop the industry all over Brazil. As I told before, we are creating jobs. We are supporting all the industries in Brazil to be productive, innovative, and competitive. So we are also training and educating the population of Brazil, because this is crucial for the future, and developing R&D and open innovation too. So this is what we are developing. But I would say that the proposals for public policies in all fronts, this is very important, because we can work in a complementary way to the Brazilian government. If they accept the proposals, it's okay. If they don't, we continue having this dialogue and trying to build together what we believe that would develop Brazil.
So George, we heard, last night about how many branches there were of Piraeus Bank and how you've optimized that and things, and yet I know, and I think we're going to visit this in Ioannina, you have a very special presence in the different regions of Greece and have recognized the heritage, the silver heritage of Ioannina and things. What is the role of the largest bank in Greece in accelerating this place-based innovation so that you don't just have Athens and Thessaloniki driving your growth in future?
Well, let me comment a little bit, first of all, broadly for Greece, and then I will specialize it for Piraeus Bank. I would say most probably the phrase place-based innovation and growth fits most likely to Greece best, because Greece is now at a stage where a lot of things are coming together. You mentioned 100,000 graduates. May not have necessarily the skill set, but yet they've been exposed to analytical thinking, they have developed the skill sets, and they can be perhaps utilized when the opportunities are generated. We create the conditions for new investment to come in, and as these new investments come in to materialize, then they create jobs, which they have the capability of absorbing these people. And we are lucky at this particular juncture in time to have the benefit of significant amount of funding coming from Europe, which can be utilized to enhance these initiatives in the form of boosting further digitalization, attention to green investments, which is a common goal, and many others, and providing very, very attractive financing to other corporations who have good investment ideas to come and do all of the above. Within that context, Piraeus Bank, of course, sees a business opportunity, but also has a social responsibility as well. And we strive to respond to both these needs. We have put behind us a lot of the heritage, the legacy issues we have had, which we inherited from the big crisis. We have a clean balance sheet, therefore we are in a position to go and finance this envisioned growth, which is already happening, and we expect this to gather momentum as we go through, and we take off as a country. But also we have a social responsibility, and we, as I said, we are projecting it by listening carefully what are the social needs, and we're trying to be responsive. And we have done that, as I mentioned before, with Project Future being one, Project Equal being another one, but also you mentioned museums, and museums, Piraeus Bank is unique in this respect because it has a collection of museums which bring up the culture, the heritage of the country in various traditional handicraft and other activities from the past, like silk, like marble art, which goes back 2,500 years, the olive oil, of course, which goes again thousands of years behind. And these are, though, centers of activity which are outside Athens, and they create the forum for the various participants in the small societies to, and we initiate activities around those museums, which are, again, centers to foster idea exchange, opportunities for younger people, and dialogue among the social class, which enhances social trust.
Isabel, Portugal's not a large country, but it has a historic past and history of exploration and discovery and being a maritime leader, et cetera, and yet, you know, you are training the next generation, innovation and things, but what is your role, do you think, in broader economic development between the North and the South, and maybe that broader Iberian Peninsula? And I'm going to even be bold and say that historic nexus of the Atlantic linking Portugal, Brazil, the United States is an interesting thing to think about in terms of a cluster almost.
That is true. And there's a scholar of the Mediterranean, Fernand Braudel, that says that geography is destiny, right? So I think in our case, geography was destiny. I mean, you had it was either moving inland or going out into the ocean and into the Atlantic. And I think this geographical location, because Portugal has been traditionally a country that has been traversed by many cultures and has had the ability of accommodating those different cultures, places us, and let's talk 2022, as an important diplomatic player. The reason we've had, I mean, the Secretary General of the UN was a former Portuguese prime minister and is someone who's trained in this, skilled in this effort of trying to bring antagonists together. So the honest brokering in politics, it's also a country that has learned. So as Greece, we experienced the 2010-2011 crisis. That crisis was met with immediate reforms, tough and very courageous reforms by the government then. And they were so courageous that when they stood up for election, they won the election, but they were ousted by a negative coalition in parliament. But we are reaping the benefits of those reforms that were implemented in 2011. So this history of the shock that was placed on the Portuguese economy to control public spending, and those were draconian measures to control also our debt. Pulling out of the crisis was majorly the effort of private business, the exports, and the innovation scheme. We are the fourth country in Europe with the largest number of unicorns as we speak. Portugal has more unicorns than Spain and Italy put together. And this is owed to the structure and the strength of our our research and innovation system. The reforms of the research and innovation system in Portugal occurred in the 90s, and this transformed completely the overall scheme. Going back to the issue of place-based innovation, universities were crucial in the interior of the land to continue to develop economic activity and to drive business as demographics was going down. And basically, it is true. You can only be global and be recognized as a player if you have roots, if you take advantage of your position, of the strengths in your community, build those up to the national level and then to the international level. the connection to the United States, to Brazil, to the Portuguese-speaking countries, and that is a huge block. If you think about Brazil, which is a global player, a very rich country, but look at Africa as well, and the importance of Africa. Kande was talking about that yesterday. It is very important to connect, to make this connection between the global north and the global south, and really work not to extract, but to empower and to work collaboratively. And there I see a very strong role for Portugal, and this is what we've been playing.
And thank you for bringing in Africa, because that's also part of the interconnectivity of the place-based innovation. We are out of time, but we're going to take a few more minutes. I'm prerogative of chair. I know Gianna's looking at me. We don't have grumbling stomachs yet, but I have an important question for Chad, and then a challenge for Ray at the very end here. Chad, first state, Delaware, Tennessee. In a couple weeks, we're going to have Spotlight Tennessee at the U.S. Council's National Competitiveness Forum. You're a son of Tennessee, great universities, Oak Ridge National Lab. Tennessee's becoming the place for the future mobility, major investments, batteries, auto. You're going to talk about those magic ingredients that are transforming your great Tennessee, but you also were the leader for First State Delaware. So just quickly, a little bit about that. And then Ray, you got to think about how many unicorns you're going to have in the next 5 years.
So I think place-based innovation will turn out to be one of the most significant things the council ever does, because you're on the ground, you're doing something, you're taking a step forward. Very simple model. Know where you are, know where you're going to go, but you got to take the first step. Place-based innovation, whether it be Delaware, Tennessee, or Athens, you just got to take the first step and get on with it.
Great. Ray, how many unicorns do you think?
I don't know. That's probably not the right question. I think the right question is how many solutions will we transition to the 6 priority sectors? And in the first year of operation, we transitioned 30. So in the first year of operation, we transitioned 30 solutions in 6 priority sectors. I used the word TRL, and it occurred to me that you may not know what that is. Technology readiness levels go from 1 to 9. So 5 is kind of proof of concept, and that's where usually institutes focus on that, and they need commercialization partners to go on. I'm going to make one more comment, though, Deborah, and that is that in the defense industry, we have something called competimates. And so these are competitors in some cases, and sometimes they're teammates. And I think the world of competitiveness needs to think about that kind of model where we collaborate to solve these very big problems. And I think actually living in the UAE, they are the current model for bringing the world together to solve global problems. They don't take sides. They try to bring everyone together. And I think that's a good model for solving these global problems going forward.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank our fabulous panel of leaders, GFCC board members. We're going to think going forward, too, about the spirit of competitiveness and competitiveness strengths as we also address our challenges and opportunities. So thank you all very much, and thank you for your leadership and support of the GFCC here in Africa.